Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our first webinar of 2021, Consumer Behaviour and its Effect on Businesses, where we will be sharing with you our research that we've done surrounding the changes that have happened over the past 12 months. All of our findings will also be shared in our Rare Insight report, which you will be able to download following our webinar. Just to very quickly introduce myself, my name is Hannah, and I am the Marketing and Client Onboarding Manager here at Rare Group. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Rare, we are a research and product development company focusing on creating customer wins. And before I hand you over to Keith Crane, who is our research director on the consulting team, I'm just going to take you through a little bit of housekeeping bits and bobs, although I'm sure a majority of you are very familiar with Zoom. So at the bottom of your Zoom page, you'll be able to find your toolbar, and there you should be able to see a Q&A button. So please do send through any questions that you have throughout the webinar, and we'll be able to answer those for you. And we'll also be doing a very quick live Q&A at the end with Keith. And throughout the webinar as well, we'll be doing some polling questions. So Keith will prompt you on those, and you'll be able to find the polling button on the bottom of your toolbar. Finally, if you have any questions or any feedback at all, or any ideas of subjects that you're interested in that you'd like to know further, please do put any suggestions in our chat box or email us directly as well. So I'll now hand you over to Keith to talk you through our research.
Thanks very much, Hannah, and hello everyone, and thanks very much for joining us this morning. This webinar should take around 40 to 45 minutes, so we'll have time to have a little brief Q&A at the end, as Hannah's alluded to, and still give you enough time to grab a coffee in time for your 12 p.m. meetings. In our new report, which you'll receive a copy of, we will explore how consumer behaviour, particularly in the last 12 months, has changed, the effects it's had on both the consumer purchasing cycle and on those businesses that exist to serve them in particular markets. Looking at the categories in particular of automotive, retail, consumer tech, at-home fitness, and private and over-the-counter healthcare, we will uncover some key priorities for each market. This research shows that there is much to learn from these consumer behaviours, and ultimately the biggest question of all, which of these behaviours will continue to grow unabated when things start returning to normal? So across the last 12 months, we have seen a number of critical changes to both the demographic and economic makeup of the UK. The UK has seen the highest unemployment rate for 5 years, with 5.1% or 1.74 million people out of work, according to the latest figures from the Office for National Statistics. Although the UK economy has been in lockdown, and non-essential businesses have been forced to close their doors, so far it hasn't resulted in a rapid rise in unemployment, as the furlough scheme has helped to protect jobs. But this is expected to change throughout the rest of 2021. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, expects up to 2.2 million people to be unemployed at the end of this year, or 6.5% of all workers. So whilst the market goes into recovery, hopefully later in 2021 and into early 2022, what will the purchasing process look like for consumers? Now, as Hannah mentioned at the start of the call there, we're going to be doing a couple of polls in this webinar just to make it a little bit more interactive for us all. So exactly 12 months ago, when the first lockdown hit, we decided to start running a COVID-19 tracker, and we have been running it ever since. 12 months ago, when we ran this in the first instance, some 67% of the workforce had concerns about job security. So I'd just like to start by doing a quick poll now to ask you, how do you think that has changed since then? And what percentage do you think it is now? So you stick your answer in the poll that should pop up on your screen now, if you don't mind, and we'll come back to it later on. So we have a juxtaposition in the economy where indications show that consumer spending is tight as people think twice before parting with their precious pounds. However, in many instances, this is delayed rather than cancelled spend. We have seen curious cases of massive pent-up demand in sectors such as the automotive trade after the first lockdown of 2020. and is expected to be replicated in the first half of 2021. It's kind of inextricably linked to both increased car usage post-lockdown and the declining trust and intention to use public transport systems initially due to COVID transmission fears. We've also seen similar increases in consumer technology, digital and online fitness platforms, home gym equipment and healthcare to the door markets in 2020, alongside the well-publicised growth in supermarket spending. Each one of these, again, is linked to the downscaling of their mirror industries. So public transport, gyms, schools and universities being closed for face-to-face learning, the reduction in attendances to GP surgeries and A&Es, and the closures of trades like the restaurant and pub trades. So ultimately, changing behaviours calls for a changed approach to business operation, products, marketing and advertising. And the data we've gathered in our report shows a real difference in performance between these categories, which provides a number of learnings. Firstly, which sectors are likely to show permanent change in consumer behaviour? Which are more likely to return to normal? And which steps businesses should take to establish best-in-class traction on return to normal economic trading conditions? Meanwhile, the impact of digital processes, both for marketing and sales, is not to be underestimated. The ever-growing accessibility of choice and peer-to-peer review platforms has resulted in significant challenges for brands to maintain front of mind and achieve share of sale in an increasingly noisy marketing and advertising landscape. All of this leads to some challenging questions. How to cut through the noise and deliver what consumers actually want and need? Can my brand come out of this fitter, leaner and stronger than ever before? And who's stolen a march in these changing times already? So our report, which you'll get a copy of, will define these consumer behaviours in more detail, an intention for future purchase, as well as articulating the reasons why certain behavioural changes are more permanent than others. Is it simply a case of the more things change, the more they stay the same? Or is it more likely that necessity is the mother of invention? So the challenges and changing environments being experienced by consumers is the first step in identifying causes of these drivers for behavioural change. The numbers that you see on the screen just now are giving some context to the current working makeup of the population. And of that 51% that are currently employed, a significant, although reducing number, are still on furlough. From a peak of almost 9 million people last year, as of last month, there were still approximately 4.7 million people in the UK on furlough, according to the HMRC, and that's still around 15% of the UK workforce. So aside from the makeup on the working makeup that you see on screen, we can also see that close to a third of the population, and that's 31%, not including those that are retired, are currently out of work or in self-employed or 0 hours or temporary positions. So it isn't surprising that a still high proportion of the population have real concerns about job security at the moment. So I asked you guys a question a few minutes ago about concern with job security. So Hannah, if you can show the results of that poll, please. The results are on screen now. So as you can see, and the majority of you got the answers right, so congratulations there. It is still high at 46%. As I mentioned, we've been tracking this for the past 12 months in our COVID tracker that we commenced in March 2020. And initially concerns about job security, as I said, was as high as 67%. So it has reduced slightly, certainly, with the introduction of government fiscal measures to minimise impact, particularly the government job retention scheme and business grants for the self-employed. However, it is still, of course, a large proportion of the working population that are worried that they may not have a job in future. And whilst this doesn't mean a reduced necessity or desire for purchasing, it does have a clear and tangible impact on the decision-making process for not only non-essential and big-ticket purchase timings and spend levels, but also on the channels, avenues and retailers considered in COVID times for these sectors. So the key sectors that we've got coming up that we've looked at in our report Firstly is the automotive sector, where we're going to look at purchases including mainly new and used vehicle sales, but also servicing, repairs, aftercare, and automotive accessories. We'll then look at the non-food retail sector, where we'll look at trends in here relating to the purchasing of things like clothing, white goods, products relating to hobbies and interests, DIY and gardening, and so on. And in consumer tech purchasing, we will ask if there's anything to be found in habits for purchase of, for example, games consoles, mobile phones, tablets, computers, TVs, and the likes. Then we have the at-home fitness surge. What do we know about that? We'll be looking at products relating to fitness, including apps, content such as workout plans, in-home gym or exercise equipment, or personal training facilities, and so on. And then finally, in our private and over-the-counter healthcare look, we will see or ask, what are we seeing there in elements such as online healthcare consultations, like virtual doctor's appointments, private medical procedures, non-cosmetic beauty treatments, subscriptions to healthcare products, and so on. Now, across the automotive sector, excuse me, we are seeing change in behaviour even before COVID-19 hit us. And there has been a large-scale shift in business operations in recent years due to the introduction of digital disruptors such as CarWow, increasing direct competition to dealer networks from local competitors of different manufacturers to a more nationwide inter-retailer price war. And CarWow has actually seen car buyers across the UK widen their search for the perfect new car during the COVID-19 lockdowns, actually seeing a doubling of sales between 51 and 100 miles from a customer's home address. And this shifting model of behavioural change is also giving rise to innovative organisations who work across both methods. And See It Now, for example, an organisation that provides app-based video solutions for manufacturers and retailers in order to create a more transparent and easy car buying and owning experience for their customers. So, as you can imagine, this is one of the sectors we expect to see some relatively permanent shifts in behaviours in. In our research, we found that 29% of the UK adult population had made a purchase in the automotive sector of some kind in the past 12 months. And video and distance purchasing is playing a massive part in that. And from See It Now's own recent Accelerating the Digital Customer Experience research white paper, we saw that 84% of car buyers who had already received a video from a retailer found it to be an invaluable part of the customer experience. But conversely, on the other side, it does create some, the purchasing process does create some worry for retailers, with 77% of retailers being concerned about how the increase in e-commerce may affect their ability to build relationships with customers. So we are seeing that the advent of competitive pricing and deal-based platforms such as CarWow, rich and immersive video solutions from consumers through the likes of See It Now already, but added to this, increasing consumer demand for virtual demos, online purchase and finance arranging, contactless test drives and contactless home delivery of vehicles to the customer, as well as things like collection from home services for aftercare, servicing and repair and so on. We posed the question, are local dealerships going to be needed to the same size and scale in the future? Of course, there will always be a need for local service centres, fast fit networks and accessories retailers. However, the size, scale and scope and remit of these businesses in the future may bring about both opportunities for cost saving through things like real estate downsizing and challenges for upsell. Traditional methods of upselling service plans, alloy and gap insurance and service package upgrades, for example, which traditionally have been better successful when done in person by a qualified professional who can accurately define features and benefits. In our research, as I said already, we found that 29% of the population had made a purchase in this sector in the last 12 months. And of that, we found that 22% of them said that I purchased and viewed my vehicle virtually and it was delivered to my door. A further 22% on top of that then said I purchased and viewed my vehicle virtually and then picked it up. So Whilst a growing trend initially, we can see that this demand is not just being accelerated by COVID-19, it's actually also being incredibly well received by the public. So with 44% of car buyers in the last 12 months being done almost entirely virtually or entirely virtually, which is actually outstripping the performance of entirely in-person dealings. The virtual car buying process is indeed more light than the traditional in-person method we're seeing. 88% of people who purchased entirely virtually and had a vehicle delivered to their door said that I enjoyed the experience and I would want this method to continue. And indeed, only 8% said I didn't enjoy this experience and would prefer a different way. So that 88% who enjoyed the experience and would want it to continue actually rises to 93% for adults under the age at 32 years old or under. So it's an even more pronounced figure. So if a tech and fiscally savvy consumer can buy a Skoda at their local dealer in London for £25,000, but could spec out an identical vehicle and have it delivered directly to their door for £23,500 from a Skoda dealer in Liverpool, why wouldn't you? So it raises the question, will smaller groups or independent retailers get priced out of the market in the year ahead? Volkswagen, for example, have over 200 individual showrooms in the UK. And our forecast is that in the next 5 years, we will see manufacturers slash the number of showrooms across the UK, but continue to provide regional hubs as well as large city sites. And this has the benefit of major cost saving for manufacturers, but little to no implication on the end user for availability of purchase in the long run. The opportunity remains to gain a large slice of the pie by moving to a hyper-personalised approach to sales and aftercare for local retailers and dealer networks, whilst also looking at the viability of a nationwide delivery strategy, as well as a seamless UX and purchase process for national retailers and manufacturers. Now we'll move on and look at retail in a little more detail. The last 12 months have been a proverbial game of two halves for the retail trade. As an industry that is vital to the UK economy, it accounts for some 5.1% of the UK GDP. It has been particularly impacted in COVID-19 times, particularly in the more traditional high street or bricks and mortar avenue. Total volume of retail sales in the UK dropped by 1.9% in the UK in 2020, which is frighteningly the largest fall since records began. It was even more pronounced in non-essential retail, with some of the contraction counteracted by online purchasing. However, there were some noticeable success stories, more notably in online spheres, from global power players such as Amazon, through to some specialist subscription businesses, including organisations such as HelloFresh, who actually saw a doubling in their revenues in 2021 as a direct consequence of lockdown measures. Indeed, that whilst we can see the understandable and significant and sizable shift towards online retailers, we are acutely aware that this has benefited national and global corporates much more than local and regional retailers. Indeed, Amazon's UK sales soared by 51% last year to a record £19.5 billion in the UK alone, as people turned to the internet retailing giant to buy items unavailable in closed high street stores and to keep them entertained. In fact, the £19.5 billion that UK customers spent at Amazon in 2020 is roughly double the takings at Marks and Spencer, the 137-year-old retailer. And that underlines how the COVID-19 pandemic is revolutionising the way we shop and threatening the future of the high street. Whether or not they paid enough tax this year to reflect that success is another question, of course, but there are a couple of notable subsectors you can see here. So indeed, even where a retailer is deemed essential, for example, in products relating to DIY, gardening and home management, 46% of the population that have made a purchase in this sector have done so online also more frequently in the past 12 months. Coupled with the 28% that said they had done this more frequently in store as well in the past 12 months, it's hardly surprising when we see that Kingfisher PLC, who are the owners of B&Q and Screwfix brands in the UK, have posted total Q4 2020 revenues up 16.9%, and that was supported by an astronomical e-commerce sales growth of over 150%. So with online sales driving the retail economy this past 12 months, but a latent demand for consumers to get back to some semblance of normal life, is there an opportunity in the real world of the high street for local and regional retailers? Where local retailers have been able to benefit is those that have been able to successfully pivot to a more clicks and mortar method of retailing. Whilst for some retailers, having a local high street presence is of paramount importance, what is of equal importance is the necessity to offer a quick, easy and efficient solution to the millions of customers who are travelling less, working from home and preferring to stay local during current times. As you can see on screen there, we have 47% of consumers agreeing that I prefer to shop local and I would prefer to continue doing this regardless of coronavirus restrictions in the future. However, 32%, a significant proportion of that, also agreed I prefer to shop local, but I don't actually feel safe to do so right now. So one clear way to maximise this opportunity for local and regional retailers is to offer either or both click and collect and local home delivery services. But we can also see that in our research report that behaviour is born out of necessity in some cases. So whilst online purchasing has skyrocketed in 2020, it's not necessarily what consumers would like to do in an ideal world. However, with those fears and threats around safety and during the coronavirus regulations times, over and above click and collect and local delivery, critical to also ensure that adequate and clearly enforced social distancing guidelines and cleaning regimes will ensure that customers prefer and still prefer to shop local because they feel safe. And this is at a time when, going into the remainder of the year and the beginning of the next year, there will be more available retail floor space at better available rates for local and regional retailers as some of the larger national retailers pull out of markets on a big scale across the country in 2021. In consumer tech, where we'll have a look now, we have seen strong demand for home computers, tablets, smartphones, and games consoles, and that's really helped the consumer electronic revenues perform very well in 2020 amongst many retailers. Globally, shipments of home computers and tablets rose by 11% to almost 400 million units in 2020, whilst revenues increased by 17% to a total market value of almost $200 billion, as millions found themselves needing new devices for working and learning from home. Games console revenues also rose by 18% to almost $12 billion, driven by the launch of new consoles as well as lockdowns. But not every category was successful. Sales of wireless speakers, including smart speakers, for example, fell by 3% to 240 million units, and TV sales were also down slightly by 2%, but actually that was a significant improvement on the industry market expectations and forecast earlier on in 2020. In the UK, organisations such as Dixon's Carphone, AO.com, Gear for Music, Curry's PC World and others have actually shown promising online performances in 2020, whereas businesses that were unable to pivot successfully early on to online models such as Bright House were early casualties of coronavirus, who of course folded 12 months ago. You can see from the figures on screen that of those who have made a purchase in the consumer tech sector in the last 12 months, 39% have purchased a laptop and so on across games consoles, TVs, iPads, tablets, apps, and online games. But also in the case of tablets, games consoles, apps, and virtual games themselves, the figure is actually significantly higher than that when we look specifically at parents as an audience, which somewhat is understandable, and you'll see more information about that in the report. Clearly, there has been both a necessity for home working and learning, but also a desire to make the most of in-home experiences for both adults and children alike at a time when boredom and restlessness is high. This sector was already very strong in the online world, and it's unlikely to change post-COVID-19. For example, many more people purchased tech products online because they wanted to anyway, as opposed to in-store purchasing. Those that did make that purchase, 55% online, wanted to do that anyway, as opposed to 32% who preferred offline methods of doing so. So this is an industry that is much more likely to return to some semblance of normality in terms of the avenues of purchasing post-lockdown, but not necessarily in the volumes of equipment. In our research, we can see that 56% of the population that have made a purchase in this sector in the last 12 months. And as you saw on the previous slide, of those that had made a purchase, what proportions had bought what gadgets? Many of these are even more pronounced amongst parents, as I mentioned. Indeed, 39% of those making purchases in this sector did so online because they needed to adapt to working or studying from home, versus only 26% who made that purchase in store. So online purchase with quicker home delivery times and a wider variety of choice and price points is preferred amongst those what we would call stress purchases as required. So with this increased frequency, high pricing and value cost of individual units, is a consumer tech rental boom on the horizon? Now, we've already seen plenty of talk about the marketing term of generation rent, with Gen Zs and millennials increasingly renting property, in the main driven by cost, but also there's a generational shift happening towards experiences over things. So, for example, vehicle subscription businesses from the likes of Volvo and Jaguar Land Rover, we've seen huge increases in personal vehicle leasing and increasing numbers of startup organisations offering rental of consumer tech, such as Fat Llama, Wonder, Switch Rentals, and so on, alongside more established ones such as Hughes Rentals, moving more into the online sphere. And we think that we potentially are on the cusp of change. Generally, tech gadgets are outdated within 12 to 24 months of purchase, and renting and leasing of this equipment is easier, more cost efficient for the customer, and significantly much more sustainable for the industry, with the likes of lithium-ion mining and battery replacement and refurbishing of stock. So with reusable and refurbished tech possibilities, it also increases the natural lifestyle of natural life cycle of products for suppliers. In relation to at-home fitness, COVID-19 has impacted almost every aspect of our lives, and our fitness regimes are no exception. Across the world, health and fitness apps have seen a huge spike in downloads. Is in or near home fitness here to stay, or will it fade away back to pre-pandemic levels when things return to normal and people can get back into the gyms? I mean, who can forget that at 9 AM on the second day of national lockdown, Joe Wicks turning on a camera in his living room and saying, "Fantastic, right, here we go," and setting a new world record. Over 955,000 people, almost 1 million people, tuned into episode 2 of PE with Joe on YouTube, which was the biggest audience ever for a live online workout. And over the lockdown summer, Wicks actually streamed a further 68 workout sessions and clocked over 80 million views. And individually, he made in excess of £10 million from coronavirus lockdown. And it's not just apps and live sessions. The increases seen in purchasing of home fitness equipment and rental has actually been quite staggering across the same period. Brits have been cancelling their gym memberships en masse. One gym said it had lost over 178,000 customers, representing a third of its members inside 3 months. Despite this cancellation of memberships, people have not given up on their health and fitness. They've turned to increasingly at-home methods, as you would imagine. There is a significant proportion of the population who have become new to health and fitness, though, as a regime in 2020, having not been gym goers before. And these audiences are much more likely to stick with these newfound methods. And it's not just fitness apps or services either. Incredibly, home gym equipment sales spiked by a massive 5,813% between the UK going into lockdown in March last year and by the end of summer 2020, according to the price comparison site Idealo. They've turned to in-home methods of getting the blood pumping, and most popular equipment sales include steppers, weight benches, exercise bikes, and cross trainers. And by July 2020, gym weights, for example, had already outsold in 2020 more than the entirety of 2019 combined. Now, that in and of itself has created challenges for retailers. All across the price entry points, we've seen excruciatingly long lead times for equipment, with most treadmills and cycling machines, for example, out of stock for months at a time, and even the super premium segments of in-home fitness, for example, Peloton and Echelon Fitness, seeing lead times of 3 months or more for delivery of their equipment. That really is an indictment of how popular this market has become. It would have previously been almost unheard of for a £2,500 cycling machine, where you also have to have a near £40 a month Peloton membership to go with it, have such a long lead time as a result. So it's a success certainly for Peloton, but has added a number of logistical issues due to supply and demand. So this has been such a rapid and monumental change in behaviour in the last 12 months, but it does leave us with the obvious question to ponder. Is some of that shift here to stay? Now, let's get the obvious out of the way. This is big, it's really big, it's popular. Even previous couch potatoes and non-gym goers are getting in on the act. Our research shows some clear trends. Of those that have interacted with the fitness sector in the last 12 months, 44% of them enjoyed the experiences and would want this to continue. And 82% have said that they've exercised on their own outdoors, for example, running, jogging, cycling, etc. So our research concludes that actually, whilst a larger proportion of those who were very much into fitness prior to COVID will look to ditch the at-home fitness and return to the gym and classes together post-COVID, there is a significant proportion of the population who have become new to health and fitness as a regime in 2020. And these audiences are much more likely to stick with the new methods we have found. So both in-gym and in-class and at-home methods have growth opportunity there. So, as I said, that 44% of those surveyed stated that they've enjoyed the experiences and would want this to continue in future. But it also does indicate that a larger number miss the social and competitive elements of group or gym fitness and would benefit from returning to this post-COVID. And again, we'll touch upon this more in the report that you'll have sent to you after this webinar. And in the last sector that we're going to look at in particular before we look to wrap up the webinar, we're now going to look in private healthcare, cosmetics, and over-the-counter medicine. Firstly, we have seen a direct relationship between attitude of concern and doing non-cosmetic beauty treatments, which may sound a little counterintuitive. But in our regular COVID tracker that we've been running over the last 12 months, we have seen that 26% of consumers who are not concerned about coronavirus actually watched beauty treatment tutorials and content from personalities, either online every day, twice or 3 times in the past 7 days. Now, there seems to be relationships between attitude to coronavirus and willingness to be more engaged in beauty. And those who are less concerned are more likely to be watching beauty videos and content online. And that's 26% of those who aren't concerned versus 12% who are more concerned. We've seen a corresponding increase in purchasing of vitamins and dietary supplements also as a direct consequence of COVID as a result. And in private medicine and healthcare, a sector that is traditionally a grey area and in some cases an exclusive enclave of the wealthy, has also seen a particular growth in the last 12 months. Notably out of a fear that they will not be seen due to the NHS struggling and a backlog of operations. HCA Healthcare, for example, which runs some of the best known private hospitals in London, including the Portland and the Lister, as well as providing private care at Guy's, says that it has experienced a doubling in the number of patients opting to pay out of their own pocket for a range of procedures such as hip surgeries, cataracts, and abdominal procedures. Separately from healthcare providers, we've also seen sales in vitamins and supplements, as I mentioned, grow quite significantly, and it's grown by 8% in 2020 as a market, reaching a market value of around £500 million here, as health-conscious Brits up their vitamin intake during the coronavirus pandemic. Research according to Mintel finds that a quarter, or 24% of consumers, have taken more vitamins, minerals and supplements this year as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, with immune health now being a priority. And it's for a variety of reasons too. And more than a third of those, 36% of them, take them to strengthen the immune system, and around 1 in 7 of them are actually using them to improve their mood and to combat stress. Similarly, we've seen exponential growth in the use of virtual consultations, aka telemedicine, in the last 12 months in the UK. Much of this, which is seen in the NHS through GP surgeries, of course, but also through momentous growth through private healthcare and non-surgical beauty treatment clinics. In fact, Hannah, we'll have a second poll if we can. And of those that have made a purchase in private healthcare in the last 12 months, what proportion of them do you guys think have sought a virtual consultation with healthcare professionals outside of the NHS? I'll give you guys 10 or 20 seconds to put in your thoughts, and we'll reveal those numbers on the next slide. And with 1/5 of consumers seeing themselves spending more in this sector post-lockdown, there's an element of feeling that whilst the majority will return to approaching normality in spending, we will see some changes in behaviour on a more permanent basis. One particular sector where there is likely to be pent-up demand similar to that seen in the automotive sector is in medical aesthetics, particularly in non-surgical cosmetic procedures such as botulinum toxin and dermal fillers, where both the increased time spent at home and closure of clinics has meant a drop in the number of procedures taking place in 2020. Indeed, some of our clients and clinics in the medical aesthetics sector are showing a more than 2-month full book after they're allowed to reopen again. The combination of patients wanting to feel good about themselves, increased opportunities for socialising and return to work is making this sector look very promising indeed. Given that much of the cosmetics market is now non-surgical and potentially more affordable at the same time as interest in web traffic has grown, it doesn't currently look as though there will be a drastic demand impact. And in the short term, the pandemic appears to have actually accelerated interest in a market that has lost much of its stigma and become increasingly accessible in recent years. So in the last slide, we asked you, of those that have made a purchase in private healthcare in the last 12 months, what proportion of them do you think have sought virtual consultations with healthcare professionals outside of the NHS? And Hannah will show you those results now. So the answer is indeed actually 45%. So quite a split there amongst folk taking part in the poll, but 45% of those that have made a purchase in private healthcare in the last 12 months have sought virtual consultations with healthcare professionals via Zoom or similar outside of the NHS. And it's a high figure and quite a telling one, but not one that we necessarily expect to stay the same. We expect a continuing growth and rise over the long term, but we expect this to pull back somewhat when COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. Now, the fact that our research shows that 45% of those that have made a purchase in private and over-the-counter healthcare in the last 12 months have sought online consultations with healthcare professionals outside of the NHS. This will drop off quite significantly in the year ahead, and we expect this to continue to grow. However, in the field of non-surgical cosmetic procedures, private medical consultations, beauty therapy, and holistic treatments. But we should also expect sales of vitamins and dietary supplements to continue to grow above forecasted rate, at least until the end of 2023. Currently, the global market size of that industry in 2021 is $151.9 billion, but it's forecast to reach $272.4 billion by 2028, which is a really large 79% increase in 7 years. Now, there is a number of defining attributes to go with that, but it just goes to show you the rise in that organization. So as you can see, and as you've seen previously, there are some clear indications across all sectors we've researched that an increase in demand and spend is just around the corner, some obviously more pronounced than others. However, in automotive, retail, and fitness in particular, businesses will need to be at the forefront of understanding their consumer and dropping content, products, and services that will strike the chord of solving a consumer need. These challenges cannot be solved by marketing and advertising alone. Consumer insight, behavioural analytics, and new product development will play an increasingly critical role in the future success of businesses in the country as we move forward into the new world post-COVID. So whilst it's safe to say that some sectors will continue with a permanent shift in the purchase process driven by consumer behaviour, and some will slide back towards original behaviours, no single industry will be left unscathed. And therefore, businesses that fail to innovate in the months and years ahead will ultimately fail to fulfil their potential. And in conclusion, core to the ability to pivot comes the ability for businesses to accept and be open to the need to change and embrace failure along the way. Most entrepreneurs will tell you failure is a core part of the innovation process, and not everyone in a delivery role is comfortable with this idea. Often in innovation projects, companies focus on the technology that needs to be adopted rather than the organization mindset to undertake it. And from experience, we know that this is often more important. So that's us coming to the end of the webinar now, and thanks very much to all of you for joining us today. As Hannah alluded to at the start of the session, this webinar is a snapshot of our report, Consumer Behaviour and its Effect on Businesses, which is being released imminently. You will receive a copy of the report direct to your inboxes, but if any of your colleagues would like a copy, it will of course be available to download on our website. And I'm going to finish up now and pass over to Hannah, where we've got, I believe we've got around 5-10 minutes spare if there are any questions, and I'll pass over to you. So thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Keith. Yes, we've had a few interesting questions come through. So one is, do you expect one sector over another of those discussed to bounce back faster than others?
Yes and no. I mean, ultimately, a lot of that is relative terms. Some of those industries have bigger purchase numbers than others and higher frequencies of purchase than others. I certainly would expect a high latent pent-up demand in the automotive sector, once again, similar to what we saw last year, and also in the retail sector, the offline retail sector, shall we say, where there has been a number of shops unable to open during that time. Gym and in fitness as well, you would expect people to go back en masse as and when they're ready, but you will find that, for example, done in stages. There will be a cohort of people who don't really care about anything else and just want to get into the gym, and there'll be another few cohorts that will maybe just want to wait a week or two to see how things shape out and how things pan out before doing it. And with regards medical aesthetics, for example, we've already seen through conversations that we have with our clients and some of our clinics that they already have full waiting lists and waiting books for up to 2 months. So a lot of that is going to be down to how quickly they can improve demand. So short answer to it is all of them, but some will be more pronounced than others, I would think.
Perfect. So we had another question in that's specifically around the tech sector, which says, do you think tech such as augmented reality, etc., will have a role post-COVID-19 for retailers?
Yes, I think so. I think a lot of that is tied into the processing power and the ability of current and modern and about to be released mobile devices to be able to do that. I think the success of augmented reality in retail will be largely driven by how well they can replicate said experience in people's households. So if you are indeed shopping for a new sofa, for example, how well that sits in the setup that you have. It's certainly augmented reality is certainly going to grow at a much faster compound rate than the next generation of that, which is more virtual reality. But a lot of growth in that sector will be hampered by availability of and power of equipment as and when it's released, as well access to a lot of that processing power and cameras and things from the various providers such as iPhone and Samsung and various other companies. So yes, I certainly do. Something that I've been using a lot more of in the last 12 months is augmented reality where possible. We've been looking to do some work around the house. But I don't think it's going to explode overnight, but I think you'll see quite a bit of organic growth on that throughout the remainder of the year as new devices come online.
Okay, great. We've also got another question here, which says, have new business models, such as subscriptions, been successful over this period? And will some of the new digital models stick long term?
Yes, some subscription businesses have been incredibly successful over the last 12 months. In terms of some of the business models, will they stick long term? I think the most basic answer to that question is it depends on how good your business model is. I think is the obvious answer to that one. From an anecdotal perspective, one of my clients is a company called Flavorly.com who work in craft beer and delivery of craft beer to the household. And upon announcement of the first lockdown, their online sales went up by an incredible 400% across that piece. Now, they offer both subscription business and singular purchasing of beers, but you can see organizations such as HelloFresh and Gusto and the likes having some really impressive sales sales issues throughout the year. That said, they have also both been plagued by logistics issues in relation to supply and demand of ingredients, accurate and timely delivery of boxes and things. Many people who maybe previously been customers of Gusto or HelloFresh say the quality has dropped as a result of supply and availability and things. So they've been a bit of a victim of their own success in many ways, and that some of them at times have been having quite a customer service nightmare this year. And because a lot of these brands and businesses are inherently online in everything that they do, so much more visible than a lot of other business models because it's just plastered over Twitter all the time, as you can see. There are, however, some organizations who are maybe looking to put digital product developments and products into place just simply because they think they need to. And whether or not that's going to be the right thing for them or not is entirely down to the method, but particularly the user interface and the user experience that people have. It's got to be easy, it's got to solve a problem, and it's got to be something that actually differentiates themselves from the rest. So yes, subscription models massively big across a number of sectors. It's not just food and drink, it's beauty treatments, monthly boxes like Beauty Pie and things like that have done pretty well. One of the things we also expect to see more of, and we've seen a lot of new businesses coming online, is actually subscription vitamins and minerals and dietary supplements delivered to your door as well, because you fire through them at a rate of knots when you're in the supermarkets. So yeah, hope that answers that question.
Perfect. And then we have one about how the media sectors will bounce back. Will the focus be on out-of-home advertising or online, do you think?
Oh, that's a very interesting one, and one that I have quite a vested interest in. I spent quite a long period of my career in the media industry. I think media industry in general, regardless of the COVID situation, is becoming more and more fragmented, and therefore more and more difficult to achieve high level cut through, particularly in broadcast and print medium. It's much different in obviously online advertising and social media advertising, where you can be hyper specific in your targeting. But if we're looking at the offline thing, certainly I would expect a resurgence in the out of home and the digital out of home sectors, mostly because I know that those sectors have been hit quite significantly in the last 12 months, because a lot of advertisers have gone, well, what's the point? What we have seen in that particular time, though, is some really interesting activations in out of home and digital out of home sectors, and funnily enough, they've been deliberately activated specifically to cause a social media buzz. So in some cases, we've seen some organisations take out a poster or an outdoor screen or whatever it might be, but they've actually only taken that one screen for a very short period of time, so that a few people can take pictures of it and go, that's an amazing ad, and then it carries over to online. So the fact that all of these media things they're cross-pollinating each other at a significant time. So depends on the message, depends on what you're trying to say, but yes, certainly I would expect out of home and digital out of home to rise, as well as listening to commercial radio with in-car listening to return to sort of normality as people recommence their commute again. TV advertising probably won't be as noticeable as in the current sphere, again, because it's becoming increasingly more fragmented as we go through. And well, I think print might see a little bit of a resurgence, but by and large, it's I think probably a bit controversial to say, but already on the slippery slope to oblivion, I think, in the national press. But yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, perfect. I think just one last very important question that came through. Do you think the pub passport is a good idea?
Is that a personal question, or is that an official Rare Group opinion? In a personal level, I think it's a terrible idea, personally, because I think it's unfair to exclude people who maybe are young, for example, who are the last on the list to be allowed to be vaccinated. From a corporate perspective and from a business perspective, I can most definitely see the benefits in it, because it would give both the government, local authorities and health boards confidence to know that actually, if they're opening up inside and you can go inside and have a drink or have some food or whatever else, so that you're much more likely to have lower levels of transmission rates and things. But for me, the important thing to remember in that is always the case that just because you've had the vaccination doesn't mean to say you can't transmit COVID from somebody to the next person. All it means is that you're how you feel if you get COVID won't be as pronounced as it would be if you hadn't had the vaccine. So yes, personally, no, personally, I don't think it's a good idea. And from a corporate perspective, I think I can see the benefits in it. Yeah, but I can't wait to get back to the pub.
I think most people are desperate to get back to the pub now.
Yeah.
So I think if we wrap it up there, thank you so much to everyone who's joined us. Any questions that we didn't get back to, we'll answer those in a follow-up post this webinar. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. And thank you again for joining us.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Bye.